teach your name and pray.
Amen. All right. Galatians chapter 6. And starting with verse 4. I think y'all had gone over that last time, but verses 4 and 5 says, "But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not another. For each one shall bear his own load." I know y'all went over 4 last time, but since we're starting at 5, verse 5 is connected to verse 4, so I wanted to include it. So I noticed that you had a good discussion about verse 4. So verse 5, "For each one shall bear his own load." Now, just a few verses prior to that, back in verse 2, it says, "Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." So in just a matter of a sentence here, has Paul kind of contradicting himself, or is there a difference here?
Well, I don't know the answer to the question, but I think that you would have a hard time helping someone else if you're not bearing your own load first.
Well, that's true.
So,
Yeah.
I think that's an element.
That's certainly,
Elementary, in other words. Bear your own load before you be able to.
yeah, before you bear. Yeah, if you're not bearing your own, then it's just going to be hard to help someone else. That's certainly something to be considered. Mallory?
I understand verse 5 is that everybody has their own struggles.
Right.
Whereas verse 2 is saying, so therefore, like, look down at other people when they're asking for your help. We all have struggles, so we all need to help each other.
Right.
Because we're all going through this.
Right. We all have our own. We all have our own things, as you mentioned, but we need to look at others as well, like you said, not to look down or not to in our own self, maybe not to have too much pride and be prideful. To say, you know what, I can do this on my own. I don't need any help. Satan does a really good job of us of trying to get us to say, you know what, I don't need help. I'm my own person. I can do this. From time to time, we do need help because the scriptures talk about that. We talked about to bear one another's burdens, and of course, y'all went over that last time. The difference between a burden and a load. When you look that up, burden is something that is almost the idea here, almost too much for one person to bear. So we have to help people, with that. For each one shall bear his own load. Remember where we're continuing the thought from verse 4 about it, let each one examine his own work, rejoicing in his own. How are we going to be judged by God in Judgment Day? Are we going to be judged on a collective basis? Am I going to be able to get away with things that I might not be able to because I'm a member here at River Ridge and there's some good people here? No. How am I going to be judged? Individually, right? Individually. Now, that doesn't mean that. Remember when Jesus was talking to the multitudes, and he took the children and he said, that we can be, it'd be better for there would be a millstone, put around your neck if you're a stumbling block. Now, I can be the cause, or I can help someone. I can be the cause to help someone to stumble, maybe into sin, and certainly I'll be held accountable for that. But I'm also accountable if I don't overcome it myself, right? So I'm going to stand before God, and for each one shall bear his own load. Chuck has said it time and time again. On Judgment Day, God's not going to say, all right, everyone who's a member at River Ridge, stand up and come forward. That's not going to be it at all. It's, Mike Johnson will come forward, and Warren Wright will come forward, and Tony will come forward, all as one.
Just like in our own on our own job, usually most times you get a yearly or even 6-month review.
Mm-hmm.
And if that doesn't happen, then you should be kind of reviewing what job you're doing.
Right.
So basically, that's what we're talking about here. Is we review a Christian life according to the Word.
Right.
If you don't review it, if you go 10, 20, 30 years, you just don't think about that.
Yeah.
You can get way off track.
Yeah, you can. We can kind of apply like a business principle that you're talking about because in business or in job or whatever it is, in your job, you would expect that you would be better, 6 months or a year from now, than you are. You would expect some improvement as you go along. Same thing applies, and Paul even talks about that, that, he talks about, when we're first Christians, we're on milk, but then we need to kind of graduate up to, meat. If I've been a Christian for 5 years and I don't know much more than I did 5 years ago, then I've got a problem. All right, I need to do some more studying. I need to be in the Word more. I need to be doing some things to understand better, because the ultimate goal is to get to heaven. But we certainly want to understand. We certainly want to understand what we're teaching, or understand what we are reading, and what we're coming here for. So then, as Dave mentioned, we can take it out to others to spread the gospel.
I've always felt that if we're not gaining, whether in our work or life, I think it's almost impossible to stay where you are.
Yeah.
You're going to decline. If you're not making just a little bit of gain.
I've heard the saying before is that, of course, just in a work setting, is that, you're either getting better or you're getting worse. You're not staying the same. And so, probably the principle applies, with what you're saying, is that, we've got to increase, our knowledge, because there really is no staying the same, if you look at it. Because if we're the same that we are, if we're the same now as we were, 5 or 10 years ago, then that's not a good thing. You probably look at that as maybe declining, because we're not contributing as we should, and then that can be looked at as actually getting worse, right? So, all right, do I see hands or anything? Just people messing with their hair. So, all right. Any questions or comments or anything? So, for each one shall bear his own load. So, it's not contradicting verse 2, all right, at all. So no contradiction there. We certainly understand, as y'all went over last time, we have to bear one another's burden. A burden being, as was mentioned, something that's almost too much for someone to handle. This right here has the idea to do with, we're going to be judged individually by God. Each one shall bear his own load. Meaning, when I stand before God, then there might have been people who tried to cause me to stumble. Maybe on purpose or not realizing what they were doing, but I'm still responsible to overcome that, and then that right there goes back to verse 2, because if I stumble, then maybe I can have some help from other Christians. But at the end of the day, I'll stand, individually, you'll stand individually before God, and we'll bear our own load, meaning that we will present what we've been entrusted. So, all right. So that's verses 4 and 5. Were there any questions or comments? I know y'all had a pretty good discussion last time. I think it was Bernice's question, if I was listening right, and everything from last time. It seemed like it's a pretty good discussion, and everything on that. Are there any further comments or questions or anything? All right. Let's look at the next section of verses, and we'll take these and look at them and discuss those. Starting with verse 6, we'll read down through verse 10. It says, "Let him who is taught the word share in all good things with him who teaches. Do not be deceived; God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption. But he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially those who are in the household of faith." All right, I think we have some good verses here to look at. So let's start with verse 6. So, it's time for glasses when your arms aren't long enough to see here. So, all right. So back in verse 6, let him who is taught the word share in all good things with him who teaches. So what are we talking about here? What is this verse referring to? So we've got two things under consideration. We have the person who is taught, and then who is taught the word, and then who's the other person under consideration? The teacher. And so what's the relationship there? Obviously, teacher and student, but one. But what should the relationship be, for that? What do you think it's talking about here? Let him who is taught the word share in all good things with him who teaches. So we have the teacher, and then we have the teachee, I guess, or the student, right? Person receiving the teaching. And what does it mean when it says share in all good things? Or what do you think it means?
Go out and teach.
Do what?
Go out and teach.
Go out and teach. So share in all good things, but all good things meaning the gospel. So, Bernice? The knowledge. Sharing the knowledge with, receiving the knowledge, and then taking the knowledge on to others. So certainly, we want to do that. Patrick?
It should be mutually beneficial. It should encourage one another.
Right. Paul's writing here to the Galatians mentioning this. Can you think of other writings that Paul had? Can you think of other relationships that Paul had with other Christians, with other groups of Christians? Yeah, the Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 1, 4 through 9. I think there's a special relationship between, between the teacher and the teacher. We should have a lot of respect for the people that take the gospel to those who taught us, to those who taught us God's word. 1 Corinthians 4. Did I have that right? 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 4. Paul says, speaking to Corinthians, I thank my God always concerning you for the grace of God which was given to you. He's writing to the Corinthians that you were in. He goes all the way down through verse 9. We won't read all that, but but you can tell by that section of verses there, Paul's love for them. If you go to Ephesians chapter 1, the church at the Christians there at Ephesus, in Ephesians chapter 1, in verse 15. If someone has that, they can.
Therefore, I also, after I hear of your faith in the Lord Jesus, and your love for all the saints.
Yeah, do not cease to give thanks. Do not cease to give thanks for you, making mention of you in my prayer. So, sorry, Tina, I meant to say through 16 there. Someone moved Ephesians in my Bible. I couldn't find it. So so his mention of Corinthians and Ephesians, the churches there and the Christians there was a special relationship, right? And why should we? Well, just Paul mentions it here, but just in your opinion, why should we have that special relationship? Why should we have that? Why should we have that thankfulness, and why should we have that appreciation for those who teach the gospel?
Especially the ones that taught us, they helped us find salvation.
Help.
The most important thing is ever.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of important things in life, but there's nothing more important than salvation, right? And for the person to come along and to teach that, we should have appreciation for them. Now we understand that person, that person who taught us didn't technically save us. The gospel, God's word, is what saves us. But appreciating what they did, you can imagine if, I don't know, if you were stranded out in the middle of the ocean or something like that, and your boat sank, and someone came by and saved you. Would you just go on, with life without even thinking about that person again? If they made an effort to save you from certain death, then yes.
Well, the person that is teaching and going through the methods, really expressing it and demonstrating and making sure that you get the understanding They don't have to do that.
Yeah.
They don't have to be a doer. You see what I'm saying? They can just sit and look at you, and as long as they know they're part of it. So that's another reason why it's a good thing to be grateful for.
Well, there's certainly obligations that we have, in order to take the word to others. Now, if we look at it from, have I taken it to everyone that I could have? I would ashamedly say no. I haven't spread the gospel as much as I need to, but certainly we could look at it to say, you know what, they could have passed on by and not said anything, but they decided to say something, because there's always that fear of rejection. There's always that fear of ridicule, people making fun of you or whatever it may be. So, Mallory, and then
Verse 6 also shows there's a relationship that happens when you're teaching, when you're in a student. And if you're a teacher and your whole point is just to get them baptized and you lead them,
right.
that's going to leave the student thinking, well, what was the whole point of this? But there's a relationship here because, just like my friends, I'm going to share with them exciting things that happen in my life.
Yeah.
So that's what happens here between the student and the teacher. You develop a relationship that should be everlasting.
Right.
And so it's showing that love that you actually have.
And that's a good point. And we see that with Paul. Remember, even though Paul had left these places, we'd been there and visited and left, he still had a strong affection for Christians in other places, places that he had been. He'd asked for prayers for them, talked about longing to see them again. And there's mention of them being glad to receive him back. So yeah, that relationship is special.
Just going back to the teaching part,
Yeah.
And how important it really is. You don't know how you come across to be like. I was taught, or was somebody introduced me to it before, but they were raised in church.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. Well, it took somebody that was not raised in the church that could understand what I was. Questions and
Yeah.
the things that I had that could relate to me.
Yeah.
So you don't know who you come across that you might relate to that you could actually teach.
Yeah.
So it is important.
It is important. We have to look for those opportunities, and you also have to. I think you hit on a good point, and an interesting dynamic is that I was raised, quote unquote in the church, meaning that, that from the time I remember, my parents were taking me to church. I was getting taken out, and Dad was, busting my hind end for, ever since I was a kid. And so, that's how I was raised. Not everyone here, had that, like Janet was talking about. And I have extreme respect for those who who were taught the truth maybe later in life, or who weren't. And when I say raised in the church, that's the term that we use. But the reason being is because I've asked myself before, if I wasn't a Christian, if I didn't grow up, going to the Church of Christ, and someone talked to me about the gospel, would I have been receptive? Or would I have been, I've always gone with my family over here, to whatever denomination, or I've not gone to church at all. Would I have been receptive? And I was asking me, would I have been receptive to that, or would I have been, I don't really care. I'm going where my mom and dad go. I'm going where my friends go. Whatever truth is, I don't really care. I'm more interested in, in relationships. I would like to say that I would be interested in truth. I would think that, but I don't know. I have a profound respect for those people who my wife is one. She was raised Catholic, and so she understands. And it's almost like people. This is my view. All right, it's Mike's view. It's almost sometimes the people who weren't raised in the church have a better appreciation for teaching others and things like that, because they've been in that situation where they were truly lost. As opposed to, from the time I was a child, I was always in one of these pews listening to sermons, and then it was just kind of a process. Tina.
The ones that were raised in the church have a tendency, if it's not approved.
Understand.
They get comfortable.
Right.
And comfortable is not a good place to be.
No.
But my other point where Janet was saying, what Janet was saying was, it takes all kinds of teachers, because I may teach someone, work with someone, and I'm getting nowhere, but then I can find somebody that
Yeah.
maybe has a softer
Right.
way of coming across and saying, could you help do this? And then they be the one that connects. So it takes all kinds of teachers.
Right.
And it is our responsibility as a teacher to see our flaws, like I'm too harsh, I'm too,
Yeah.
and to work on it.
Yeah.
Come across better.
Good point in that we need to examine ourselves as teachers, not to say, okay, well, instead of just saying, well, it's their fault for not accepting what I'm saying, to look at, when I say soften the delivery, maybe. No, I start to say soften the message, not compromising truth, but looking at things and saying, what, can I present this in a better manner, but without compromise.
The message is always the same.
Exactly. The delivery, that's good. Like, Nikki, do you have?
It just makes me think of the term, your second generation Christians.
Right.
How we didn't experience the struggle that our parents, grandparents went through to come to Christ. And so we tend to have a little bit of complacency, like, kind of like you said, taking it for granted that it's kind of always been saved.
Yeah.
You're not saved.
Right.
Like for me growing up in the church, it's never really a question for me whether or not I was going to get baptized or something like that. Just Christ would be presented at some point I would.
Yeah.
There was never really any desperation for Christ.
Right.
Until I got
Yeah.
and it's a different experience when you come from out of the world.
It is. It is. And, because one of the things I've noticed is that, and kind of like Tina was saying, this is just kind of a general statement, is that people that come from out of the world, I say out of the world, who weren't, raised, in the church, there's that term again, is that they're more apt to talk to others and share their faith, easier. Now, I understand that that's a broad general statement that doesn't apply to everyone, but and I'll tell you this: I have to pray constantly for boldness to share my faith with others, whereas my wife has no problem, just saying, what, I see you laughing, saying I'm telling. So to whether it be something as simple as inviting someone to services, what you would think would just be, fairly, innocuous. I mean, what kind of ridicule could come from inviting someone to service, much less, inviting someone or an invitation to a Bible study, or maybe just engaging in a Bible conversation about Bible things, about maybe saying, I noticed that you go to this certain denomination. Can you tell me about them? Where is that found? In the scriptures? Because as much as we want to soften the message, sometimes there's some direct questions that have to be asked, and none of us that I know of really like conflict, but that's part of the things that happen. With that, we just have to teach the truth in love. All that to say, getting back to what we were talking about, and Nikki kind of hit on it very well. It's amazing that growing up sitting in the pews, you always just kind of had that feeling. Well, once I reach a certain age, then I'll just get baptized, and you never felt. I thought she put it well. Never felt really the desperation, to say, man, I've got to be saved. And not only that, and I heard this and I may have mentioned it before, so I apologize. But one of the things that really kind of hit at my heart, I'd heard an atheist had put out a video, and he actually had a good question and a good point. And he said, even though I don't believe in God, he goes, I can't imagine how selfish it would be for a Christian to think that, or to know that obeying God and serving Him is right, and people that don't do it, are going to lose their souls and burn in hell, and not share that with other people. To say, you are in mortal danger here, and so he was saying, I don't understand why Christians don't do that. That really hit hard at me, because how many people have I passed by in my lifetime where I could have spoken to them about some spiritual things, and I didn't. There's a song we sing in our songbook. I assume it's in this one where it's "You Never Mention Him to Me" and everything. It's pretty convicting song to think that on Judgment Day, someone might turn to us, maybe a coworker or a friend or whoever it might be, who just got condemned to hell by Jesus, to say, why didn't you say anything? And so, Jenny.
Church of Galatians, this is several churches. Galatia was an area. So that group of Christians and congregations were new, basically. And that's the reason Paul said that he was, surprised that they were already having problems.
Right.
You asked the question, if you hadn't been raised in the church, how would you react when you got older? You had that question.
Right.
Look at what's happened to the church the last 50 or 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
Very old.
Right.
I mean, it gets more out and more out and more out.
Right.
Now, that would not be happening
Mm-hmm.
if the members of the congregation was considering it was important for them to make sure that the truth was being taught there. The way all that's developed is people, well, I don't want to cause any trouble.
Rock the boat,
I don't, so just let things go.
Right.
But I think in your own mind today, at least you feel like that if you were in that situation, you wouldn't know it. You'd speak up and say something to make sure that the truth is being taught.
I feel that way.
Yeah.
But, as with anything, when it comes down to it, would I truly stand up and say, if everyone here was in agreement, if we wheel the piano down here, if everyone in here, was saying, we're going to use the piano when we sing, would I be strong enough to stand up, the only one, and say, that's not right, we shouldn't do this? I would like to say yes. Now, when it came down to it, looking at everyone else here, knowing that they agree
Majority.
with an example, So
Majority is not.
exactly, majority is not.
So, the only course you have, in my opinion, would be, brother, this is not right, here's the scriptures.
Right.
And I cannot participate in this.
Yeah.
I mean, you go do something.
Yeah. You mentioned that about the church. I know we're getting off a little bit here, you mentioned about the church and the movement over 50 or 60 years. A couple of things to consider. One, will River Ridge, will the congregation be here in 100 years? I don't know, but if we don't stand for the truth, it won't. I know that. But second of all, it's interesting that, to my knowledge, none of these churches, Galatia, Corinthian, and Corinth, and Ephesus, do not exist today. None of these congregations. Now, to my knowledge, I know a couple of years ago there was a sermon I heard a preacher saying that at that time there weren't any. I don't know if one had been started there, but these particular ones, because there was a sermon on what happened to the churches that Paul wrote to. And so it's interesting, but it's also sobering, kind of scary to think, with an apostle actually visiting these congregations, and they still at some point, died out because of whatever. But can that happen here? It can. Just like anything, just like any congregation, not just this one, but any one. All that to say, how in the world do I get all the way back to what we were talking about in here about teaching the word, relationships, and having appreciation for those who teach, understanding, having appreciation on both sides. Like I mentioned, I appreciate people who love God, and I appreciate their example, and I appreciate people that have grown in the church, who grew up in the church, as we talked about, and I appreciate those who didn't grow up, who accepted, who obeyed the gospel later on, who recognized that. Because, like I said, I know when I was younger that if I didn't grow up in the church, I'd pretty confidently say that I probably would have rejected any sort of, invitation to Bible teaching or anything like that. So that being said, our relationship, let's make sure that we appreciate those who teach the truth, not just preach and teach, but they have to preach the truth, because that is, that's a difficult thing to do. If you ask them, Chuck or whoever it might be, the things that they go through. Okay, all that to say, any questions or comments or anything? All right. Well, I don't think we're going to get through, but that's okay. Verse 7. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, but he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. Okay. So, do not be deceived. We know whenever we read that what has happened? Yeah, there'd be no reason to say, do not be deceived if people weren't being deceived. And what are people being deceived? What are they wrong in thinking in this verse?
That they'll get away with not being punished.
With not being punished. So that goes to my second question about do not be deceived. God is not mocked. How can we mock God? How do people mock God today? I mean, is it simply just a matter of saying, I don't believe in God, or are there other ways that we can mock Him? Or yes.
I've heard a lot of people say, well, God loves me, so He doesn't want me to suffer eternally. And I think that's very much mocking God by saying, well, sure, the Bible said this, but
right.
That's not what it really means.
Yeah. It doesn't have to mean, mocking God doesn't have to mean that we openly ridicule the idea of there being God. All right, we can mock God by thinking that some of the commands and some of the things found in the scriptures either don't apply to me or don't apply to certain situations. Jen?
Or they say, I believe God would think, in my heart, that, they.
Yeah. I believe, and I think, are dangerous when you're talking about absolute truths, obviously, because then it becomes subjective. I believe that God, there's a huge part, especially in society today. There's this overall idea being pushed that if you disagree with someone, on a certain subject, that you hate them. And I was thinking about a couple months ago when the Supreme Court, passed the gay marriage, the gay marriage mandate there that recognizes gay marriage. And afterwards, there was that little hashtag, I guess, that's, so prevalent now in today's society, but it said love wins, indicating that, that if you accepted that and agreed with that, then that was love, and that if you did not agree with with the decision for gay marriage, then obviously then you hate those people. So the idea, I'm not getting off on that particular tangent, but back to what Nikki was saying, people saying, well, that doesn't apply to me. Love is accepting every single thing, which is ridiculous, to think that, that could be mocking God, right? Because we know what the scripture says, but then we do something, completely different, thinking that God is going to accept it. So, Dave, did you have your hand? Did you have your hand up? Let me go.
Whatever man told you to walk to read, God is not mocked. So what man does, or what he obeys, if he don't obey, he'll be
right. And yeah, I'm glad we can get to that here. When we sow, it says that. Give me your thoughts on what it means when it says that which a man sows will he also reap. Just kind of put it in layman's terms. What does that mean?
It's going to get the payback for his actions.
Good or bad, right? So, I go out and I live a life, if I, cheat on my spouse and I lie, cheat, and steal, at work or just in my general life, and and I start, drinking alcohol and doing drugs and things like that. Am I going to reap some bad things from that? Yeah, I am. Just in general, it doesn't take, it's not a big, huge, not be a big, huge profit to look at someone who lives a life like that, whether it's me or someone else, to say that things aren't going to turn out well. But the same can be said for, doing things that are right. One of the most powerful things about God and His wisdom, and to me anyway, and His book here, if someone doesn't have, just in a general sense, tell me what works out better. And I'm talking about general. We're not even without considering spiritual things. Will someone have a better life if they live by the moral principles found in the Word? Yes, right. Regardless of, even if there's say an atheist, who doesn't even believe in God, but you know what? He's a good husband. He's a good father. He works hard. He's good with his with the things God's entrusted him materially. He's nice to others. Yeah. On the whole, things are going to be better, right? But what separates that is what the spiritual blessings, right, is that we have, because there's so much, especially now, in as we have, election season, politicians, are so bent on, if you vote for me, then I'll make things easier for you materially. You'll make more money, and this and that, and yeah, that sounds good, okay, but that's not what life's about, Life, you'll be happy. There's a reason that over 70% of people that win, millions of dollars in the lottery end up, bankrupt and committing suicide. When they did that, study on that, that which we sow, that will also reap. That, it's amazing. It's amazing how that just covers, everything. So yes.
Sometimes we don't read it until eternity.
Right.
There are a lot of really great people in the world.
Yeah.
With extremely comfortable lives and have everything they can possibly want. They truly are.
Yeah.
Satisfied and happy and
Yeah.
are content to live exactly that way, and they don't think that.
Right.
They will.
Yeah.
And, conversely, they're wonderful Christians who live lives of abject poverty and have nothing and have trial over trial.
Right.
And they don't reap the good benefits until they die.
Until which is the most important time to reap them. It'd be nice to reap to experience them now. But what you're talking about, but he who sows, the end of verse 8, but he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. Whatever happens in this life, a lot of good things can happen materially, a lot of bad things can happen. But if we sow and reap to the Spirit, then in the end we benefit with everlasting life, and that trumps every single thing that could happen in this life. Okay, a lot of injustices happen, in society, every single day, and yeah, those things are bad. But nothing is worse than getting to the end of life and not being able to benefit from reaping spiritually. We just have a few minutes left. I'd heard this example given before, and I thought it was a fairly good one. If we look at, if I had an apple seed up here, or an apple seed, and I planted the apple seed out there, and then in miracle of time, let's just say I plant it, and all of a sudden the tree comes up. How many apples do I get out of that one apple seed? I don't know. How many apples come on the tree? You don't know. So I don't know. Let's just say 30. I don't know. Is that about a good thing? Is that how many apples come on the tree? Okay. Well, I'm teaching. So all right.
Say 100.
All right. Say 100. Okay. So 100 apples come on the tree. I'm teaching. We'll say 100. All right. So 100 apples come on the tree. Now, what's inside each of those apples? How many? 4. So now we've got 400 seeds. And so I plant 400 seeds, I get 400 trees with 400 apples. And you just see, I won't do a math lesson here, but, you see the exponential growth there, And so I think about that with sowing and reaping, spiritually with God's word. You think about the tremendous benefits, of living a life devoted to God. And while it may not ever manifest itself in this life, where we see, the material, things of it, I'm convinced, if we live a life according to God, according to His Word, then we're going to benefit greatly. Maybe not materially, but in our relationships, with people that are good and godly, the right type of people, that we should be associating with, people that are interested in truth and those types of things, it'll benefit greatly, not only us, but think about, our, generations to come, our kids, our grandkids, and certainly, on down the line. So, all right. Starting in verse 9, let us not grow weary while doing good. We'll start there. We'll start there next time, Lord willing, with I think Chuck preaching. So.